Hastings, he admitted. "I cannot be sure, of course, but I have a little idea." "What do you mean?" "Where do you think that formula is now, my clever collaborator?" Poirot asked. "Well, how should I know?" Poirot looked at Hastings for a moment, as though giving his friend a chance to consider the question. Then, "Think, my friend," he said encouragingly. "Arrange your ideas. Be methodical. Be orderly. That is the secret of success." When Hastings merely shook his head with a perplexed air, the detective attempted to give his colleague a clue. "There is only one place where it can be," Poirot told him. "And where's that, for heaven's sake?" Hastings asked, with a distinct note of irritation in his voice. "In this room, of course," Poirot announced, a triumphant Cheshire cat-like grin appearing on his face. "What on earth do you mean?" "But yes, Hastings, just consider the facts. We know from the good Treadwell that Sir Claude took certain precautions to prevent the formula from being removed from this room. When he sprang his little surprise and announced our imminent arrival, it is quite certain, therefore, that the thief still had the formula on his person. What must he do? He dare not risk having it found on him when I arrived. He can do only two things. He can return it in the manner suggested by Sir Claude, or else he can hide it somewhere under cover of that 1 minute of total darkness. Since he did not do the first, he must have done the second. Voila! It is obvious to me that the formula is hidden in this room." "By God, Poirot!" Hastings exclaimed in great excitement. "I believe you're right. Let's look for it." He rose quickly and moved to the desk. "By all means, if it amuses you," Poirot responded, "but there is someone who will be able to find it more easily than you can." "Oh? And who is that?" asked Hastings. Poirot twirled his moustache with enormous energy. "Why, the person who hid it, parbleu!" he exclaimed, accompanying his words with the kind of gesture more suitably employed by a magician pulling a rabbit out of a hat. "You mean that—" "I mean," Poirot explained patiently to his colleague, "that sooner or later the thief will try to recapture his booty. One or the other of us, therefore, must constantly remain on guard." Hearing the door being opened slowly and cautiously, he broke off and beckoned Hastings to join him by the gramophone, out of the immediate sight of anyone entering the room. The door opened, and Barbara Amory entered the room cautiously. Taking a chair from near the wall, she placed it in front of the bookcase, climbed on it, and reached for the tin box containing the drugs. At that moment Hastings suddenly sneezed, and Barbara, with a start, dropped the box. "Oh!" she exclaimed in some confusion. I didn't know there was anyone here." Hastings rushed forward and retrieved the box, which Poirot then took from him. "Permit me, mademoiselle," said the detective. "I am sure that it is too heavy for you." He moved to the table and placed the tin box upon it. "It is a little collection of yours?" he asked. "The birds' eggs, the seashells, perhaps?" "No, I'm afraid it's much more prosaic, Monsieur Poirot," replied Barbara with a nervous laugh. "Nothing but pills and powders." "But surely," said Poirot, "one so young, so full of health and vigor, has no need of these bagatelles." "Oh, it's not for me," Barbara assured him. "It's for Lucia. She's got such an awful headache this morning." "Ah, la pauvre dame," murmured Poirot, his voice dripping with sympathy. "She sent you for these pills, then?" "Yes," replied Barbara. "I gave her a couple of aspirin, but she wanted some real dope. I said I'd bring up the whole outfit. That is, if no one were here." Poirot, leaning his hands on the box, spoke thoughtfully. "If no one were here. And why would that matter, mademoiselle?" "Well, you know what it is in a place like this," Barbara explained. "Fuss, fuss, fuss. I mean, Aunt Caroline, for instance, like a clucky old hen, and Richard's a damned nuisance and completely useless into the bargain, as men always are when you're ill." Poirot nodded in comprehension. I understand," he told Barbara, bowing his head as a sign that he accepted her explanation. He rubbed his fingers along the lid of the case containing the drugs and then looked quickly at his hands. Pausing for a moment, he cleared his throat with a slightly affected sound and then went on, "And do you know, mademoiselle, that you are very fortunate in your domestic servants?" "What do you mean?" asked Barbara. Poirot showed her the tin box. "See," he pointed out. "On this box there is no speck of dust." To mount on a chair and bother to dust so high up there, not all domestics would be so conscientious. Yes, Barbara agreed. I thought it odd last night that it wasn't dusty. You had this case of drugs down last night? Poirot asked her. Yes, after dinner. It's full of old hospital stuff, you know. Let us have a look at these hospital drugs, suggested Poirot as he opened the box. Taking out some files and holding them up, he raised his eyebrows exaggeratedly. Strychnine, atropine. Very pretty little collection. Here is a tube of hyacinth, nearly empty. What? Exclaimed Barbara. Why, they were all full last night, I'm sure they were. Voila! Poirot held out a tube to her, and then replaced it in the box. This is very curious. You say that all these little, what do you call them, files were full? Where exactly was this case of drugs last night, mademoiselle? Well, when we took it down, we placed it on this table, Barbara informed him, and Dr. Corelli was looking through the drugs, commenting on them, and... She broke off as Lucia entered the room. Richard Amory's wife looked surprised to see the two men. Her pale, proud face seemed careworn in the daylight, and there was something wistful in the curve of her mouth. Barbara hastened to her. "Oh, darling, you shouldn't have got up," she told Lucia. "I was just coming up to you." "My headache is much better, Barbara, dear," Lucia replied, her eyes fixed on Poirot. "I came down because I wanted to speak to Monsieur Poirot." "Oh, but my pet, don't you think you should—" "Please, Barbara." "Oh, very well, you know best," said Barbara as she moved to the door, which Hastings rushed to open for her. When she'd gone, Lucia moved to a chair and sat down. "Monsieur Poirot," she began. "I am at your service, madame," Poirot responded politely. Lucia spoke hesitantly, and her voice trembled a little. "Monsieur Poirot," she began again, "last night I made a request to you. I asked you to stay on here. I begged you to do so. This morning I see that I made a mistake." "Are you sure, madame?" Poirot asked her quietly. "Quite sure. I was nervous last night and overwrought. I am most grateful to you for doing what I asked, but now it is better that you should go." "Ah, c'est comme ça," Poirot murmured beneath his breath. Aloud, his response was merely a non-committal, "I see, madame." Rising, Lucia glanced at him nervously as she asked, "That is settled, then?" "Not quite, madame," replied Poirot, taking a step towards her. "If you remember, you expressed the doubt that your father-in-law had died in natural death." "I was hysterical last night," Lucia insisted. "I did not know what I was saying." "Then you are now convinced," Poirot persisted, "that his death was after all natural?" "Absolutely," Lucia declared. Poirot's eyebrows rose a trifle. He looked at her in silence. "Why do you look at me like that?" Lucia asked with alarm in her voice. "Because, madame, it is sometimes difficult to set a dog on the scent. But once he has found it, nothing on earth will make him leave it, not if he is a good dog. And I, madame, I, Hercule Poirot, am a very good dog." In great agitation, Lucia declared, "Oh, but you must, you really must go. I beg you, I implore you. You don't know what harm you may do by remaining." "Harm?" asked Poirot. "To you, madame?" "To all of us, Monsieur Poirot. I can't explain further, but I beg you to accept my word that it is so. From the first moment I saw you, I trusted you. Please." She broke off as the door opened, and Richard, looking shocked, entered with Dr. Graham. "Lucia," her husband exclaimed as he caught sight of her. "Richard, what is it?" asked Lucia anxiously as she rushed to his side. "What has happened? Something new has happened. I can see it in your face. What is it?" "Nothing, my dear," replied Richard with an attempt at reassurance in his tone. Do you mind leaving us for a moment?" Lucia's eyes searched his face. "Can't I—" she began, but hesitated as Richard moved to the door and opened it. "Please," he repeated. With a final backward glance in which there was a distinct element of fear, Lucia left the room.